Yo guys, it's your friend here, bringing you another awesome Naruto what if tale. Which is, without wasting your time, let's start the fanfic. What if Naruto was loved by Hinata, charmed by Ino, protected by Temari, healed by Sakura and bound to Karen? Ino sat quietly behind the counter of her flower shop. She knew she would soon be busy with Valentine's Day quickly approaching. She already had several orders she needed to prepare within next month. Again she sighed. She would spend another Valentine's Day alone. I hate this time of year, she mumbled softly as she watched a couple walk past her shop holding hands. They looked so happy, too happy for her liking. She would be lying if she said she didn't want the love that couple that just passed obviously had. Even though it was only for a moment, she saw the love in the man's eyes as he listened to the woman walking beside him talk. God, I hate this, she said, laying her head on the counter. Bing! Ino quickly raised her head when she heard the bell ring, letting her know she had a customer. She put on her best smile. Hi, and welcome to the Inoichi's flower shop. How can I help you, Todi? Ino said as cheery as she possibly could. She had long changed the name of the flower shop in order to honor her father's memory once her mother had given her ownership. Hiya Ino. Ino looked up to see Naruto standing in her shop. She raised her brow because he seemed nervous. He was giving her his usual smile, but his body language told her he was nervous. It was odd really, Naruto was never nervous around people. Hey Naruto, here to buy some flowers? Ino asked as he moved closer to the counter. Even though she already knew the answer, it was just a habit of asking everyone who entered her shop. It was times like this that Ino envied Sakura. She just couldn't for the life of her understand why her pink-haired friend didn't just go out with the poor guy already. Ino tilted her head a bit in thought as she watched Naruto look at the various flowers in her store. Normally he would just buy Sakura roses since they were her favorite. I'm assuming this is for Valentine's Day, right? Yeah, Shikamaru told me I should get my order in a little early since you're really busy around that time. Okay, well I have a few specials going on right now if want to take a look at my flyer. Any of these will let that special someone know how you feel, Ino said, handing Naruto a flyer. She smiled when he took it from her. As you can see, roses, tulips, pansies, daisies, and forget-me-nots are the most popular bouquets during this time of year, Ino said. She could see Naruto was having a hard time choosing. And the prices are affordable to boot. Naruto scratched his head and gave Ino a nervous laugh. I'm not really good at this. Ino rolled her eyes and waved her hand so Naruto could follow her in the back. Come with me, she said, and he immediately followed her to the back room of the shop. Ino reached up and grabbed a pot from one of the higher shelves. This is my favorite, Ino said, showing it to Naruto. She saw his smile brighten at the flower. This one is nice, is it part of the special? Naruto asked, running his finger over the delicate petals. Nope, orchids are not part of the special. I don't grow these for the shop often. These I have for myself mostly unless I have a request for them. Naruto tapped his chin as if he was thinking. What does this flower mean? Delicate beauty, Ino answered with a small smile. She looked and saw Naruto blush and look away from her. Okay, he's acting weird, Ino thought to herself. Naruto saw the price on the side of the pot. Could I get one of these? Ino nodded. Sure thing. Let's go back to the front of the store so I can write down your order. Naruto took out his wallet ready to pay as Ino handed him his order slip. Oh, Naruto, did you want to add a personal message? Sure, you can write. Ino could honestly say her day was a lot better than she thought it would be. She was currently locking up her shop to head home. Ino laughed at the thought of heading home since she only had to walk to the side of the building leading up to her apartment. She slowly opened the door and stepped in. At times she hated going home, it felt lonely. Her place, in her opinion, was way too big for one person to live. When she first got the new shop and her apartment built, she wanted a lot of space. So her current shop was larger than her old family shop had been, so she decided to make her new apartment larger as well. Sitting down on her couch, what really was she thinking? 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a study, large kitchen and dining area, a small den, and large family room. It was depressing, though she had so much fun decorating every single room herself. I need some sleep, she whispered lowly. Ino. Ino jumped at the loud noise. She heard banging on her door and her name being yelled. God. Sakura. Ino mumbled. Grabbing her silk robe, she slowly made her way to her front door. She so happened to notice the time on her way. What the hell could Sakura possibly want at 7 a.m.? She opened the door to see her longtime friend frowning at her. What? Ino asked with a raised brow. Sakura didn't answer, she just walked past her blonde friend. Ino sighed and closed the door. It was obvious something was bothering Sakura. She turned to see Sakura sitting on the couch and so she sat beside her. What's going on? Ino asked. It's not like you to show up unannounced. True, Sakura said looking at Ino. It's Naruto. Naruto? Ino asked confused. Did something happen to him? Ino asked a little louder than she wanted to. Sakura tilted her head. No, he's fine. But he's been acting strange lately and I can't figure out why. He did seem a little off yesterday when he stopped by the shop, but it didn't seem like anything to be worried about, Ino said, tucking her legs under herself on the couch. He finally came inside, huh? What do you mean? Ino asked. Well, he's been walking by this place for the past month or so. I'm pretty sure it's to buy me roses, again. Not that I mind, but I have been trying to tell him that I don't see him that way, Sakura said, sighing. What am I going to do? I hate to have to keep rejecting him, it's tiring. Ino sat and listened to Sakura's rant. She really felt bad for Naruto and really wished he would move on. There were so many other women out in the world that would love him to pieces. She thought about Hinata for a brief moment. It was no secret she cared for Naruto and maybe she cared for him as well. Ino almost smacked herself at the thought. She couldn't really pursue Naruto when Hinata still cared for him. Love sucks. Sakura stopped her rant to stare at her friend. It really does. She agreed. We never end up with the person we want and the only one who want us are the ones we don't want. Ino couldn't agree more with Sakura. Maybe she could help her friend with Naruto, but what about the flower he bought her yesterday? Ino asked herself. Love really did suck. I'll try talking to him again and hopefully he'll get it this time. I'm flattered, but I just can't be in that type of relationship with him, Sakura said with a sigh. No, I have an idea. What? Sakura asked. Hinata. Sakura's eyes widened a little. Why didn't I think of her? It's perfect, Ino. We could just get them together and this whole thing will be over. Ino smiled a little at her friend's excitement, but a small part of her didn't want Naruto with Hinata. Is that selfish of me? Ino thought to herself. It wasn't like Naruto was off limits. He didn't technically belong to anyone, but what would the others think if she snatched Naruto away from Hinata? Sakura sat quietly in her office. She was finally on her break and waiting for Naruto to meet with her. She hoped what she and Ino planned would work. She loved her blonde friend, but she wasn't in love with him. At one point she tried to see him differently, but she couldn't see him as anything other than a brother figure in her life. She knew more than anyone Naruto deserved to be happy and she was sure Hinata could make him happy. Hinata was still terribly shy, but there was no doubt she cared for Naruto. So it was her duty to make sure her friends found happiness with each other. If only my love life so simple. Like Ino had told her earlier, love really did suck. It was hard trying to find the right guy. Love was tricky and it often hit people unexpectedly. It wasn't like she didn't go on the occasional date here and there, she just didn't have anyone who caught her interest enough. Hey Sakura. She smiled when Naruto entered the room. Hey Naruto, sit, I want to talk to you. Naruto didn't hesitate to sit down in the chair across from Sakura. She could tell he was in a really good mood, and that would probably make this easier. You have anything planned for this Friday? Sakura saw him perk at her question. Nah, not really. You want to go on a date or something? He asked her with a smile. Naruto leaned back in his seat with his hands behind his back. Sakura mentally rolled her eyes. Not exactly. I was asking because I was wondering if you wanted to have brunch. Naruto raised his brow. You want to have brunch? What exactly is brunch? Naruto asked. Breakfast. Lunch. The room was silent as Naruto stared blankly at Sakura. Okay, sounds fun. Let's do it. We'll meet Lily's cafe at noon. So make sure you dress nice, okay? Naruto smiled. Of course. I won't be late. Naruto looked down for a moment before he looked back up at Sakura. Hey, can I ask you something? Sakura nodded her head. Shoot. Naruto was still quiet. Sakura was beginning to become worried. It wasn't often that Naruto would just sit so quietly. She sat there trying read his body language. It was hard to say the least since she was sitting perfectly still and not looking at her. You okay, Naruto? Naruto snapped his attention back to Sakura. Yeah, I'm fine. He stood up and smiled down at her. I'm just looking forward to brunch with you. Sakura smiled. She could tell something was bothering him, but she didn't want to push the issue. She knew he would tell her whenever he was ready. That was the good thing about Naruto, he would always let her know eventually what was on his mind. See ya. Sakura waved as she watched him run from her office. Ino stood outside of the massive gate that led into the Hyuga compound. She closed her shop early so that she could speak with Hinata before it got too late. Sakura thought it would be if Ino talked to Hinata and she invited Naruto. In a way they were secretly setting them up on a date. Ino sighed as entered the compound. Hello, I'm here to see Hinata. I'm her friend Ino Yamanaka. The guard gave Ino a once-over before moving aside to let her enter. It was always like this whenever any of their friends would visit the Hyuga compound. Not that Ino minded. The Hyuga was a prestigious clan. Thank you, Ino said softly walking towards the main house. Ino really enjoyed the Hyuga compound, it was really a peaceful place. Ino, please come in. Hinata said softly leading her to a small living space. Thanks for seeing me on such notice, I know you may be busy, Ino said sitting across from her. Ino couldn't help but smile at Hinata as she handed her a small cup of tea. I can't really stay long since I had to close the shop to come see you. I wanted to invite you to brunch noon this Friday at Lily's cafe. Hinata smiled. Of course Ino, I have been wanting to go there since it opened. It looks so nice, Hinata beamed. Ino couldn't help but smile. Hinata truly was a nice woman and she probably would be good for Naruto. Yeah, so make sure you wear something nice. If you want you can come to my place and we get ready together. Yes, I would love that, Hinata said covering her mouth with a blush. Ino laughed a little at the blushing Hyuga. She found Hinata's little outburst to be cute, and was glad she seemed to be happy about hanging out with her. Ino. Yeah, Ino watched as Hinata tried to find her words. She looked almost concerned to Ino, which was odd since the mood seemed to be a good one. What could Hinata possibly have to say to her to make her frown? Hinata, is everything alright? Are you okay, Ino? Hinata asked softly. Ino's eyes widened a little. What would make Hinata think something was bothering her? I'm not sure what you mean. Hinata pushed some hair behind her ear. It's just that, well, you seem sad. Ino looked down at the tiny teacup in her hand. She was not ready to have this conversation. She was sure no one noticed her change in behavior, but it was obvious that Hinata had picked up on her act. Ino didn't have to let her know that though. I'm fine, Hinata really. I'm just a little sleep deprived is all. Ino could tell Hinata wasn't buying her answer, but she knew Hinata was much too polite to question her further. I have just been really busy at the shop. Try not to work yourself too hard, Hinata said reaching over to pat Ino on her leg. She really was concerned for her friend. Ino gave Hinata a small smile. I'll try. Maybe I should hire someone to help out around the shop. Will that help? Hinata asked, knowing Ino would get her meaning. This time Ino didn't smile. Who knows, came Ino's soft reply. Ino locked eyes with Hinata and stood. She didn't want this conversation going any further than it already had. I have to get back to the shop. Hinata stood as well and pulled Ino into a tight hug. I'll see you Friday. Hinata pulled back a little and smiled at Ino. Ino sat quietly behind the counter at her shop. Her visit with Hinata went left, when it should have been right. She was in fact different from how she used to be. She was the only one of their friends who wasn't a ninja anymore. She decided after the war that life wasn't for her. She never really recovered from the trauma of it all. She realized that she wanted a more simple life, one she could enjoy. But that was far from the truth. She felt lonely and she wasn't sure why. It seemed everyone around her was so happy, but she couldn't find that same happiness. All her friends seemed to have so much going for themselves. Sakura was training to take over the entire medical department and Ino had no doubt Sakura would be the best there was. Tenten ran a successful dojo with her husband, Lee. Hinata had stepped down as Hire was now a prominent member of the village council at her father's request. Even her old team seemed to be doing better than ever. Shikamaru was probably going to be moving to Suna soon for good since the news of his engagement to Temari. Ino didn't have any proof, but she was sure Choji was seeing someone as well and not mention his frequent mission request to Lord knows where. Ino sighed again as looked out her shop window. The sun was slowly disappearing behind the building across the street. Ino smiled as a few kids ran up and down the streets. They were so carefree. Sometimes she wished she could go back to those years. Back to when things were easier, back to a time when the people she held most dear to her were still around. I need to get this stuff in order, Ino mumbled as she began to look through her books. As she checked the dates a small smile graced her face. What I am going to do this year for you birthday. A.N. Second chapter done. Thanks for the reviews, follows, and faves on this story. I will try to update at least once a week since I have some time off from school. I know everyone is probably wondering about Ino, and I will go into more detail on what's going on with Ino very soon. Next chapter should be out soon since I will start working on it in the next day or so. Also this story will not contain Sasuke or Neji. Which is odd for me, but I have really been feeling Naruto lately and decided to write something about him. Ino stretched her stiff limbs. She had fallen asleep on her small sofa in her study where she kept her most prized possessions. She sat up slowly and rubbed her tired eyes. She let a small smile appear on her face when she looked at the picture of her father. His birthday was approaching soon and she wanted to do something to celebrate him. She would normally celebrate with her mother, but her mother would often decline saying, "Ino, you're too depressing on this day." Ino really couldn't blame her mother. She wasn't exactly the best of company. Her mother was a strong woman. She had taken her father's death rather well considering. She always smiled. Her mother would often tell her that her father wanted her to be happy and that his sacrifice was for them. He loved us more than he loved himself. That's why I know your father would want us to be happy even though he is no longer with us. The best we can do is celebrate his memory by living our lives to the fullest. We have to look out for each other and we are able to because he thought of us before himself. Ino would constantly repeat what her mother said in her head, and at times it helped. Then there were times she wanted to yell. Ino was brought from her thought by her doorbell. She sighed and made her way to the door. She opened to see a smiling Hinata standing on the other side. Hinata. Hello Ino. I wasn't sure what time you wanted me to stop by. I know it's kind of early, but I didn't have anything to do, so I decided to stop by and see if you were ready for me, Hinata said with a smile. Ino nodded and moved to the side to let Hinata into her home. She had almost forgot about their brunch date. I'm glad you're here. These are few dresses and I was hoping you could help me choose which one to wear, Hinata said raising her arms a little. You know, I've never been good with things like this. Ino smiled. Maybe today would be a good day. Of course I'll help you. We even have time to do some good hair and makeup if you want, Ino said signaling for Hinata to follow her. Sounds fun, Hinata replied following behind Ino. Sakura sighed. Would you stop fidgeting already? Naruto stilled instantly and then slouched over a little. Sorry Sakura, I'm just not used to these type of places, he said looking around. The cafe was definitively an upscale one. Everything was so shiny and pink. Hello, are you ready to order? A tall redhead asked. Yeah, let me get. No, Sakura said cutting Naruto off. We're waiting on someone. Naruto gave her a confused look. Was this not a date? He could remember her telling him it wasn't, but they were all dressed up and at this fancy cafe. He could admit he was a little disappointed. But then he wasn't completely surprised Sakura had invited someone else. Ah, there they are, Sakura said waving her hand. Ino followed Hinata over to the small table in the corner where they saw Sakura waving them over. She smiled when she saw Naruto's face. Ino couldn't help but think his expression was due to how cute Hinata looked. They chose a white off-the-shoulder flowy dress that stopped just above her knees. Hinata also wore her hair up in a neat bun at the top of her head. Sorry we're late, Ino said taking the beside Naruto since Hinata promptly sat next to Sakura. It takes a while to look this good. Of course it would take you a while, Sakura said rolling her eyes. How you are Naruto? Hinata asked. It's been a while since I last saw you. Ah, good actually. Training mostly. Ino decided to have small talk with Sakura so that Hinata and Naruto could have their own conversation. She couldn't help but glance over at Naruto every so often to see if he was really interested in what she was saying. Ino smiled when it seemed as if they were getting along great. But then again it was odd, because Hinata seemed real comfortable. Maybe they were closer than her and Sakura originally thought. Ino turned her attention back to Sakura. She would have to ask Hinata how close her and Naruto actually are. Damn it, Sakura hissed pulling out her pager. Emergency at the hospital. Sorry you have to leave Sakura so soon, Hinata said. Yeah, we didn't even order yet, Naruto added. Ino could tell Naruto was disappointed. She would have to think of something to keep his attention on Hinata. We can do this again next week, Ino said quickly. Next week, same time? Sakura asked as she left. Yeah, Ino said as they waved goodbye to Sakura. Once Sakura was out of sight there seemed to be an awkward silence at the table. Ino cleared her throat and signaled for the waiter. There was no way she was going to let this date be ruined. Hinata fixed herself up and she looked beautiful and Ino wasn't about to let that go to waste. Ready to order? Yes, I want the club sandwich with a lemonade, Ino answered. I want the house salad with a small order of cinnamon buns. Naruto scratched his head as he looked at the menu. It was obvious he wasn't really sure what he should order since the cafe didn't seem to sell his favorite food. I guess the fried rice, Naruto answered slowly. Good choice, the waitress said taking the menus and walking away. There was an awkward silence at the table, well it was at least awkward to Ino. Hinata didn't seem to mind the silence and Naruto was staring off in space. Ino felt as if she were imposing on their date. She sighed and noticed Hinata looking out the window with a small blush covering her cheeks. Ino slowly turned to see what would make Hinata blush other than the fact Naruto was sitting across from her. Now that Ino thought about it, Hinata hadn't blushed once they arrived, which was odd. Hinata would always show her emotions, especially around Naruto. What's changed? Ino wondered to herself. Ino almost spit her tea out when she saw what, or maybe who would be the better word, Hinata was staring at. Shikamaru. Ino asked herself out loud, catching both Naruto and Hinata's attention. Huh, Shikamaru, where? Naruto asked looking around. Hinata blushed as her and Ino made eye contact. Was she missing something? Ino couldn't help but think that her shy Hyuga friend was staring at her old lazy teammate. Ino averted her eyes towards Naruto. He's outside, Ino answered. Ah, he must be just getting back from Suna. I'm going to invite him to join us, Naruto said quickly, getting up from his seat to yell out the window. Ino saw Hinata shift oddly in her seat and was about to tell Naruto Shikamaru looked busy, which wasn't a lie. Shikamaru was carrying large scrolls and she was sure he was on his way to check in with the Hokage. You okay with that? Ino asked Hinata. Hinata's blush deepened and she waved her hand slowly in front of her. It's fine really. Are you sure? Ino asked. Hinata seemed to be uncomfortable with the fact Shikamaru was about to join them. You seem, I don't know, bothered. Hinata shook her head. No, not at all. Naruto took his seat next to Ino again. He's coming. He totally blew me off when I told him you were here, Ino. Was all Ino said. But when I mentioned Hinata, he said he had some time to spare. I don't think he wanted to hang out with just us two, Ino, Naruto said, elbowing her gently. Normally that wouldn't surprise her since her and Naruto could be brash at times and Hinata being with them would mellow things out. But after witnessing Hinata's strange behavior, she knew there was something she was clearly missing. Yo, sup lazy ass, Naruto said. Shikamaru ignored Naruto's insult and looked to Ino. It's good to see you out. Ino nodded her head and smiled. It had been too long since she really hung out with anyone other than Sakura. She had become a real homebody. Yeah, I needed some fresh air. Well, you look good, Shikamaru taking the empty seat next to Hinata. I was thinking the same thing, Naruto added. Ino smiled at Naruto and then turned attention to Hinata and Shikamaru. They were talking quietly to one another. It was almost intimate, but Shikamaru was engaged, so what kind of game was he playing at? Now that Ino saw them together, it was obvious Hinata's affection for Naruto had shifted to her childhood friend. But did Hinata not know he was engaged? Shikamaru noticed Ino openly starring. What? Ino blinked and shook her head. Nothing but, can we talk later? Tomorrow, was all Shikamaru said before turning his attention back to Hinata. I'll walk Hinata home. Naruto, you think you can handle making sure Ino gets home safely? Leave it to me, Naruto replied, wrapping his arm around Ino's shoulder. Ino blushed at the contact, but couldn't help but noticed how close the other pair was walking. She was sure she saw Shikamaru brush his fingers against Hinata's as they walked. Ready to go. Ino looked up and saw Naruto smiling down at her. You don't have to walk me if you have something else to do. Shikamaru is just worried for no reason. Naruto pulled Ino a little closer to him and squeezed her shoulder gently. I'm worried about you too, besides I want to walk with you. Naruto used his free hand to scratch his cheek. To be honest, hanging out with you today has been fun. Ino raised her brow, but soon smiled. I guess I am pretty fun to be around. There's that cocky girl I've been missing, Naruto said as the both laughed and headed towards her home. The walk was nice. It was comforting the way Naruto kept his arm around her as they walked. She hasn't has any real contact with anyone besides the occasional hug from Sakura. In a way this feeling was much different. She wasn't sure why, but she liked the close contact. She didn't want to get her hopes up since she knew how Naruto felt about Sakura. Well, this is me, Ino said, moving to stand in front of Naruto. We should do this again, Naruto said, giving Ino a bright smile. Ino blushed. Really? I mean sure. Ino was happy Naruto wanted to hang out with her more, but she knew he was just being kind as always. Then there was a part of her that didn't want him to be so kind. Your dad's birthday is in a few days, right? Ino looked a bit surprised. She didn't even know Naruto knew when her father's birthday was. Yeah, it is, she replied softly. Let's do something, to celebrate him. Ino nodded her head with watery eyes. Normally she would say no thanks and stay home and cry like she did every year, but for some reasons her mother's words echoed in head. She could at least not think of his birthday and be sad. Naruto was right, just like her mother. Her father needed to be celebrated. I'd like that. Third chapter complete. I like the way this story is going and I hope everyone else it too. I am actually open to suggestions if anyone has any. I already know where I want the story to go, but I am open to tweak things a bit if I can. I know this chapter is super late, so I made it twice as long to make up for it. I do plan to start the next chapter really soon and maybe have it posted next week sometime. Ino sat at her counter like she did every morning watching children play outside. She always enjoyed watching them. Their innocent faces, their curious eyes, and contagious laughter always made her days seem a little more bearable. After Naruto walked her home last night, she did a lot of thinking. Mostly about her father and the fact that Naruto wanted to help her celebrate him this year. That little bit made her happy. It would be the first time anyone other than her mother would be with her on his birthday. It actually felt good knowing he wanted to celebrate with her. Ino wasn't really sure what she thought about Naruto. She used to see him as this annoying little pest of a boy, but that eventually changed. He had gained her respect in their teens because he was annoying, persistent with everything he did. Now as a young adult, there was something else she felt for him, but it defiantly wasn't annoyance. Last night when he wrapped his arm around her, she didn't want him to let go. She felt safe and wanted maybe. She wasn't exactly sure. She didn't want to confuse her loneliness and need for attention with her having feelings for the other blonde. Ino sighed in frustration. Love really was tricky when you're not sure how you or the other person feels. The chime of the door opening brought Ino out of her musing. She wasn't too surprised to see her old teammate enter her shop. He did say he would stop by to talk to her. She was just shocked at how early he came. "You're here early," Ino said, looking at the clock on the wall. Shikamaru just shrugged and leaned against the counter Ino sat behind. He noted that she seemed happier than she normally does. It was huge improvement to the usual facade she tries to put on. He wondered what changed. "I was in the area. How was your night?" Ino blushed a little. What exactly was he trying to imply? She narrowed her eyes at him. "Why don't you tell me about your little walk with Hinata?" Shikamaru simply raised his brow at Ino. She was curious about him and Hinata, it seemed. He figured as much since Ino was once the gossip queen. There wasn't a thing that got past her, especially when it came to the love life of others. "What do you want to know?" he asked her. "You realize she likes you, right?" Ino asked in a serious tone. "I would hope so." Ino had to stop her mouth from dropping open. Was this boy serious? He was engaged to one woman and now he was glad Hinata liked him. When did her lazy friend turn into such a player? She thought for sure one woman would be more than enough for him since he tended to do the bare minimum. Women were troublesome according to him. "Aren't you and Temari like engaged?" Ino frowned when Shikamaru laughed. What the hell was so funny? She was seriously confused. "Why are you laughing? Who told you that I was engaged to Temari?" Shikamaru asked. "It's the talk of the town. I've been hearing it for months now," Ino replied. Shikamaru shook his head. "You can't always listen to rumors, Ino. Temari and I are not engaged, never even dated," Shikamaru explained. He often got annoyed when people assumed there was more than there was between him and Temari. She was friend and that was all. "Oh, so you guys aren't an item then?" Ino said more to herself than Shikamaru. Maybe she should stop listening to the gossip, but that same gossip was pretty much her social life since she didn't go out much anymore. "So you and Hinata then?" Ino asked and Shikamaru nodded his head. Ino couldn't help but smile. Now that she thought about it, it only made sense they would be drawn to one another. They shared a young goddaughter and would often spend a lot of time together. They were perfect for each other. "Yeah, she's actually the one I'm engaged to," Shikamaru explained. "We haven't made an official announcement or anything like that yet. Only if you think I'm qualified." Ino shifted so that one of her hands was placed on her hip. "I mean, if you have the time. I don't want you to feel obligated because it's me." Naruto thought for a second. Would he really have the time to work at Ino's shop every day? Maybe he could work into his schedule because he did have a lot of free time some days. "I don't see why not." Ino smiled and offered Naruto her hand. "Well, I looked forward to working with you," Ino said as Naruto took her hand in his, giving it a firm, but gentle shake. "Yeah, me too," he replied with a smile. Hinata shook her head. "I believe he does that out of habit." Naruto isn't the most confident person despite the persona he tries to portray. I honestly believes he afraid to look beyond you. Sakura just stood there for a moment. Was it really like Hinata just said? Was Naruto only sticking around her out of habit and not because he's actually in love with her? She wasn't sure how that truth made her feel. For so long Naruto's world revolved around her, and she never really thought about what she would do if he found someone else. I know, as strange as it sounds, I believe it to be true. You remember when I said you should see the way he looks at Ino? You should really consider the possibility that you're not his most important person anymore. Hinata hated to be the one to tell her, but she would want someone to tell her the truth. Hinata knew those longing stares, and she knew Naruto spent more time around Ino's flower shop than necessary. He didn't live in the area, and yet everything he did was close by. She would often see him and wonder why he would travel so far to shop, but when she saw the way he looked at Ino, she knew. And it was time that Sakura knew as well. That can't be right, Sakura said softly. Ino sat in her mother's living room. She decided to visit her and talk to her about the trip she and Naruto were taking. She thought it would be good for them both since it has been many years since their last visit. The Southern Meadows was special place to her family. I'm so glad you decided to pay me a visit, dear, mother said, placing a tray on the small table. How is the search for an assistant? Great actually. I found someone yesterday, Ino replied before taking a sip of her tea. Well, that's good news. Any plans for the big day? Ino knew she was talking about her father's birthday. Yes, that's actually why I came to see you. I was thinking of taking a trip to the Southern Meadows. Really? I didn't expect that. I was sure you wouldn't want to go back, considering. Ino knew exactly what her mother meant. She knew she was very difficult to deal with around her father's birthday, but it was different this time around. She was excited about going with Naruto. Ino blushed a little to herself. It was Naruto who made it different this time around. Actually, Mom, it was Naruto who suggested we go. I kind of told him about it and he suggested the three of us go in celebration of Dad, Ino said with a small smile. Her mother smiled in return. I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetie. Great, I'll let him know. Who will look after the shop? Her mother asked. Ino didn't really think about that since her new hire is Naruto and he'll be traveling with them. She didn't have anyone to watch the shop. There was no way she was going to tell Naruto he couldn't go. Maybe she could ask. Ino looked down. She literally had no one to ask. I don't know. How about this, sweetie? You and Naruto go to the Southern Meadows for a few days and I tend the shop. Mom, I couldn't do that. This is supposed to be for you too. No, I won't have it. I'm fine staying behind, Ino. Really? I can always go with your aunt. I want you to go with Naruto and enjoy yourself. She took Ino's hands in hers. I mean it, sweetie. Enjoy yourself, and Naruto too if you ask me, he said, laughing. Mom, Ino said with a blush, standing up. I have to go, my lunch break is over. I'll call you later. Ino's mother watched her daughter leave her home. She couldn't hold back a tear that fell from her eye. She was so happy. She hadn't been this happy in a long time. Ino seemed happy and that made her happy. A few weeks ago she would have never expected Ino to ask her to go anywhere outside of the village, but now. Here she was opening herself up to someone and allowing them into a very private and delicate part of her life. Ino was taking a step in the right direction. I'm going to have to properly meet this Naruto. Was finally the weekend and it was going to be Naruto's first day working at the shop with Ino. She was a bit excited he was coming. She hadn't spoke to him since she told him her mother wouldn't be joining them on their trip the following week. He seemed okay with it and for that she was happy. Ino had everything in the shop ready to open in the 30 minutes. She smiled when she saw Naruto waving at her through the door. She noticed he wore a plain white t-shirt and black pants. Good morning, Naruto, Ino said, letting him in. Morning, Ino. I hope I'm not late. Ino smiled and handed him an orange apron like the one she wore every day. Nope, You're right on time actually. Just put that on and I'll show you how we'll open shop every day. Naruto followed Ino as she walked to the back of the store. For some reason he was nervous. He didn't want to ruin anything and he would hate to get fired on his first day. Okay, so back here is where I store the flowers we're going to put out front on display, Ino said, pointing to some flowers on a shelf. This is the stand I set up and all these potted plants go out front as well. So what do you need me to do? Naruto asked, giving Ino a big smile. Just bring all the flowers on this bottom shelf and the potted plants out front. I'll set the stand up while you're doing that. Ino reached for the stand only to have Naruto pick it up for her. She smiled and let him lead them to the front of the shop. I'll leave this here with you and I'll bring the rest out, Naruto said, heading back inside. Ino smiled and began putting the stand together. It would seem that Naruto was more than willing to do all the heavy lifting and Ino didn't mind one bit. She had her fair share of hauling everything out herself and it normally took her 2 trips just to get the stand out front. Ino began to assemble to stand. I should really consider getting a new one, Ino mumbled while putting it together. It was old, and it belonged to her father. Do you need any help? Naruto asked, looking down at Ino's crouched form. Ino looked up at him and smiled. She didn't even notice he was done bringing the flowers out front since she was busy putting together the old stand. It's pretty old, so it's a little hard to assemble. Ino stood and put her hands on her hips. But it's done. Was this your dad's? Naruto asked, referring to the stand. He could only assume that since Ino had completely redone everything else in the shop. Yeah, it was. I just decided to keep it. Sentimental value, you know. Naruto just nodded his head. He could understand that. It was actually a pretty nice stand. A little old looking, but he guessed that gave it its charm in a way. He actually kind of liked it. Well, let's put all those bouquets in the top 3 slots. And those small potted ones go on the bottom shelf, Ino explained as Naruto started putting flowers on the stand. They worked quietly until everything was on the stand the way she liked it. You think you can handle doing this on your own on the days you work? Leave to me, Naruto said, winking at Ino. He was sure he would be able to fix everything just like Ino wanted it. Other than this, you may have to sweep a bit around the outside of the shop to make sure it looks neat, and possibly assist me with arrangements, Ino said as they both walked back into the shop. You can also take orders, Ino added. Naruto just nodded his head. He was sure he wouldn't do anything to mess up. What she needed him to do was simple enough. I think I can handle that. I have no doubt you'll be the best partner, Ino said, touching Naruto's back. I'm glad to have you on board. Naruto blushed a little and smiled. It was the first time Ino touched him. Me too. Ino noticed her hand was still on Naruto's back and quickly snatched it down. Well, let's turn that open sign on, she said, turning away from him. She didn't want him to see her red face. It was embarrassing, really. She was getting worked up from touching his back. Really, Ino, she said to herself as she turned on the sign. Today was going to be a long day. Sakura sat in her office, unable to forget about her and Hinata's conversation a few days ago. When she thought about it, she never really thought about what she would do or how she would feel if Naruto actually got a girlfriend. Was she really bothered by it? She wasn't really sure, but she knew one thing: it bothered her that Hinata said that Ino was his new love interest. She was perfectly content with Naruto being with Hinata and she wasn't sure why. Was it strange that she didn't mind him and Hinata, but the thought of him with Ino made her feel jealous? It was strange to say the least. Her and Ino were always rivals when it came to love and she couldn't help but wonder if the same thing would happen with Naruto. Sakura shook her head. She didn't even like Naruto like that, did she? It was really hard to put her feelings into words. Words that would help her understand why she didn't want Naruto and Ino together. It was childish when she thought about. For years Naruto chased after her and now she hadn't seen him since the lunch date. Why hadn't he been to see her by now? Right around this time he would have asked her at least a dozen times to have lunch with him. Maybe Hinata was right. Maybe Naruto had moved on past her, but why Ino? That was the big mystery to her, and how did Ino feel about Naruto? She couldn't remember Ino ever voicing her interest in Naruto. She would think Ino of all people would tell her if she had feelings for Naruto. Then again, Ino was different now. She didn't engage in gossip much, nor did she seem to show any interest in anything for that matter anymore. Ino was much harder to read now. Sakura sighed and closed her folder. There was no way she was getting any work done today. She couldn't focus on anything. Naruto consumed her thoughts. Maybe she should talk to him and see where his head is. It was hard not knowing. Sakura walked outside her office and went to the receptionist's desk. I'm leaving for today. Just contact me if there is an emergency. Of course, ma'am. Enjoy the rest of your day. Sakura found herself sitting across the road from Ino's shop. She stopped by the Hokage's tower to look for Naruto. Shikamaru informed her that he was at his part-time job. Just when the hell did Naruto get a part-time job? It was even more confusing when he told her where he was working. Sakura looked through the open double doors to see both Naruto and Ino sitting behind the counter. Why was Naruto working at Ino's flower shop with her? What the hell did he know about flowers besides buying them? Sakura watched as a customer entered the shop. She saw that Ino was speaking, but she couldn't make out what she was saying. Sakura moved closer, pretending to look at a stand next to the shop. She could hear everything clearly then. Well, what do you think, Naruto? Sakura heard Ino ask. Was she flirting with him? Well, I kind of like sunflower, Naruto replied. Sakura heard Ino giggle and it made her angry. I have to agree with you. Sunflowers make people happy. I know I would be happy getting a large bouquet of sunflowers, Ino said. Yeah, they just make you want to smile, Naruto added, looking at Ino. Sakura saw Ino blush, so Naruto was flirting with her. I guess some people are like sunflowers, Ino said, walking away from behind the counter. Sakura noticed how Naruto's eye never left Ino. How had she missed this? Okay, I think I want the sunflowers, the customer said. Naruto, would you ring him up while I get the bouquet together? Sure thing, Sakura heard Naruto reply, a little too happy in her opinion. So it was true. Naruto had in fact found someone else. That little bit of information made Sakura sad. It wasn't as if her and Naruto were ever together to begin with. If anything, she should be happy for him. Maybe should just talk to Naruto first before drawing any conclusions. She was sure she was overthinking everything. Hey Sakura, Ino said, leaning out the shop's door a little. Oh, hey Ino, what's up? Sakura asked. Ino raised her brow. Why was Sakura creeping around outside the shop instead of just coming in? Hey, oh, are you coming in? Ino asked her slowly. It seemed like something was bothering Sakura. Actually I was looking for Naruto, Sakura said, following Ino into the shop. She saw Naruto sitting behind the counter. When their eyes met, he gave her a wave. When she thought about it, there was something different about his eyes. They were still kind, but they didn't look at her the way he looked at Ino. Here's the hardest working man in the village, Ino announced, and Sakura noticed Naruto blush a little when he smiled. Sakura almost gasped when Naruto looked at Ino. That was the look. He was giving it to Ino. She could remember years ago when that look was directed towards her. Now that she thought about it, Naruto hadn't looked at her like that in a long time. When did things change? Hehe, I guess I got a good boss, Naruto added, rubbing the back of his head. But if you need Naruto, he take lunch now. It's only about 10 minutes before I close for the lunch hour anyway, Ino said, walking behind the counter and grabbing a broom. There's no rush, Sakura protested. She didn't want to rush Naruto or anything. She could wait a few minutes. It would actually give her time to gather her thoughts. I still have to sweep up and Sakura doesn't mind waiting, Naruto said, trying to take the broom from Ino only to have her put it behind her, out of his reach. Naruto, it's fine really. Go ahead, but you make sure you're back here in 1 hour, Ino said, pointing her finger at Naruto. I'll clean up here. Sakura watched as Ino and Naruto had some sort of silent battle. She wasn't sure because they looked at each for much longer than she thought was necessary. It was Ino who broke eye contact first. Sakura couldn't miss the faint blush that appeared on her cheeks as they looked at each other. Naruto's voice caught her attention. "Hey, you ready to go?" he asked her. She nodded and watched as he hung his apron on one of the 3 hooks beside the counter. "Oh, before you go," Ino stated, reaching in her apron pocket pulling out 2 keys on a flower keychain. "Just in case you're back before me." Naruto smiled and pocketed the keys. "Thanks, come on Sakura." Sakura followed behind Naruto in utter shock. What was going on? Ino never gave anyone access to her flower shop and she meant no one. Her own mother didn't even have keys to the shop. She would never let anyone inside of that shop without her being there. So, Sakura couldn't understand why she was giving Naruto a key. "You wanted to talk?" Sakura heard Naruto asked. They had walked over towards the park and she hadn't even realized they made it so far. She was much too caught up her own thoughts. Yeah," Sakura said, looking around until she found an empty bench. Since there weren't many people around, it would be the perfect place to talk. "Let's go sit over there." Once they were both seated, Naruto was the first to talk. "So, what's up? It's not often you come looking for me," Naruto said with a laugh. Sakura looked down at her hands. How should she approach this situation? Just be direct. "Naruto, are you seeing anyone?" she asked. It was the best way to ask without saying any names. She saw him blush and scratch his cheek. No, not exactly." Sakura frowned. "What kind of answer is that?" "Not exactly. So there is someone you're at least interested in." She needed to hear him say in order for her to believe it. Even then she didn't know if she would believe it. Naruto didn't answer right away and that was all confirmation Sakura needed. It was like he was thinking about it or maybe he didn't want to tell her. Either way it hurt her. She should be happy Naruto moved on from her, but she wasn't. She wasn't happy at all for him. "I need to go," Sakura said, taking out her pager. She had to get away from him. "I need it at the hospital." "Oh, okay," Naruto said, slowly standing up with Sakura. "Maybe we can talk another time then?" he asked with a small smile. Sakura's eyes went big. Did he actually believe her? He didn't even seem like he cared she was leaving. "Yeah, another time. See you later Naruto," Sakura said as they walked in different directions. She turned to see Naruto pull out the flower keychain. She noticed he put his hand in that pocket and never took it out. She watched a little longer and sure enough, Naruto was headed back to the shop. From where she stood she could see him running to catch up with Ino, who was carrying a plastic bag. She felt her eyes water. Had she already lost Naruto to Ino? Naruto stood silently out on his balcony. He thought back to his meeting with Sakura and thought it was strange. It was weird her asking if he was seeing anyone. To be honest, he didn't think she really cared about that sort of thing when it came to him. He didn't mean to come off as rude to her, but really wanted to get to the shop to spend more time with Ino. He was sure Sakura would understand. Naruto smiled when he thought about the other blonde. They were becoming friends, he could tell. Ino would share things with him he was sure she would only tell a friend. Ino was smart, he learned. Not that he didn't think she was smart at first, but she had really good insight when it came to a lot of things. He thought at first it would be odd and awkward working with her, but it's been the complete opposite. Once the day went on, Ino opened up and talked freely with him, and for that he was really happy. He could remember when everyone said she was closed off from the rest of the world and he believed them. He continued to watch over Ino because of that very reason. She was slow to recover and it seemed like she went into deep depression at one while. She would never come to any dinners or outings with their group and that made Naruto concerned. Then again he could relate to Ino in a way. Everyone he ever really cared about was gone now. It was hard sometimes opening up when you're hurting. Naruto was just better at pretending than Ino. He was used to being alone and not feeling wanted. He was used to being rejected and turned away. So when he did eventually get friends, he worked so hard at being happy, he didn't let others know when he was happy. Ino was a little different from him. She completely shut down and closed everyone out. He could tell she held some insecurities about herself and he planned to help her overcome them. And just maybe in the process he could find a way to overcome his own. Naruto couldn't help but laugh. How can I help someone when I'm so screwed up myself? Naruto said softly. But that's what he did. He fixed everyone else, while he was still broken. He made sure to make them smile when he was crying on the inside, but no more. He was going to open himself to Ino if she let him. Maybe that's what attracted him to Ino in the first place. She needed someone and he desperately wanted to be needed. Naruto shook his head. Either way, he was committed to pursuing Ino. He never did anything half-heartedly. Ino was clearly interested in him. That much he figured out by just spending the entire day with her. Naruto blushed when he thought about the hug Ino gave him at the end of the workday. There was no way she would be as nice or touch him as often as she did if she didn't like him right. Naruto smiled. He would find out soon enough because he was going to give subtle hints that he too was very much interested in her. The next morning, Ino smiled as she entered the shop. The back door was unlocked and that only meant that Naruto was already there. She was actually really glad he was the one she hired for the job. Although he would only work a few days a week, she was happy with the time they spent. Naruto was special in a way she couldn't explain. She found herself wanting to be near him, even if it were just him sitting at the counter with her. She hoped she didn't seem too clingy when she would often suggest he work with her the entire time. She came to accept the fact that she did indeed like Naruto a lot, but that didn't mean anything would come of it. She was too broken and no one, especially Naruto, deserved someone who couldn't be all in. She did feel the most comfortable around Naruto at the moment. He was easy to talk to and she didn't feel as if he would judge her. She found herself sharing details of her life with him, and that in itself is a huge step for her. She told him things she hadn't even told Sakura. Morning Ino. Ino smiled when she saw Naruto trying his best to wrap a bouquet in plastic. She remembered telling him that they would need to add more to the outside display since they sold practically everything yesterday. She thought it was sweet that he came in early to try to do it himself. Then again, it shouldn't have surprised her since Naruto was actually a really sweet guy. Hey you, Ino replied, standing next to him observing his work. Not bad. Just make sure you use a small piece of tape and attach a tag. Naruto nodded. I forgot about the tags, he said softly, and he concentrated on making the plastic wrap neat as possible. Well, I'll add the tags and you can just keep wrapping the bouquets, Ino said, taking the bouquet Naruto just finished wrapping. They worked together silently and Ino began to hear her hearty beat out of her chest. She couldn't help but look at him out the corner of her eye and wonder if he could hear her heartbeat as well. Even though she was comfortable around Naruto, he made her extremely aware of him and that made her nervous. Their arms brushed lightly against each other's as they worked. I already have the stand set up and the potted plants on display. You'll be ready to run this place in no time, Ino said as they both laughed a little. I don't know about. I still have a lot to learn about flowers, Naruto said, finishing up. Well, that's why we make a good team. What you lack in knowledge I make up for it, Ino said, elbowing him lightly. She really couldn't help herself. Yeah, and what you lack in height I make up for it. I mean, you won't even need a ladder in this place, Naruto said, laughing, bumping Ino with his hip. Ino laughed and bumped him back. Well, let's get these out front, because it's time to open shop, Ino said, picking up a few bouquets. Naruto followed her lead, picking up the remaining. She let Naruto place the flowers on the stand. She wouldn't interfere this time, because Naruto had proven himself capable his first day of work. Ino watched Naruto arrange things a couple of times before he stood beside her to look. Ino frowned. It had been a while since she sold so many pre-made bouquets, and then she looked at Naruto. Was he a customer magnet, or should she say girl magnet? She was so caught up with just being with Naruto she didn't even take notice to her increase in daily sales on yesterday. It was really strange since Valentine's Day was only 2 weeks away. Maybe Naruto was the reason for that. She did notice that women would stop and talk with him when he swept outside the shop. Ino began to feel self-conscious again. Maybe she was being too optimistic when she thought there could be something between them. Because honestly, why would he want her when he could have his pick of anyone in the village? He was the hero, and he had grown quite a fanbase. Ino sighed. Maybe she was being too hard on herself. She really wasn't sure. Hey, I just noticed we're dressed alike, Naruto said smiling. Ino looked between them and blushed. She didn't even notice that. Maybe yellow was their color now. She wore it because it made her think of sunflowers and those flowers made her think of Naruto. I guess yellow is our color, Naruto said smiling. Ino blushed because she just thought the exact same thing. I was just thinking the same thing. Naruto wrapped his arm around Ino's shoulder causing her to stiffen a little. She wasn't expecting him to touch her let alone wrap his arm around her. She felt him give her arm a gentle squeeze and she instantly relaxed. She then wrapped her arm around Naruto's waist and leaned more against him. She could hear his heart beating fast and that made her smile. So, she wasn't the only one. Hinata walked quietly beside Shikamaru. It was their first outing in a while and she was very happy he asked to take her out to breakfast. Shikamaru wasn't the type of man to confess his love on daily basis, but he showed her constantly that he did in fact love her. He would do small things like the time he bought her a butterfly pillow. To most it would seem childish, but it meant the world to her. Or the time her a box of herbs from the Nara forest, or when he come home from a mission at sit with her hours before he got any rest. Hinata felt his hand on her lower back and she moved closer to him. Those simple gestures were more than enough. Like right now, she was sure he had a ton of paperwork to complete at the Hokage's tower, and yet he made sure to set aside some time for her. Hinata hummed and leaned against Shikamaru. She was the happiest she could ever remember being, but most important of all, she felt loved. Is here good? Hinata looked to the small restaurant and nodded. Here is perfect, she said and blushed when he smiled down at her. It was things like this that let her know he was the one. He wasn't one for flashy or overcrowded places. He would always pick somewhere quiet so that they could enjoy each other, and he knew she didn't really care much for crowds. Some old gut told me about this place, Shikamaru said flatly. Hinata couldn't help but laugh behind her hand. You could have at least gotten his name. I would have asked if he didn't hold me up for so long. Hinata playfully bumped him. She remembered him telling her he helped an elderly couple. You're hopeless. Hinata felt him take her hand in his as he led her to a booth towards the back of the restaurant. She had to admit that the place was really cute. It almost felt homely in a way, and she liked that. Do you want to sit next to me? Hinata asked softly. She watched as Shikamaru raised his brow before moving to sit on the same side as her. She didn't want to come off as clingy, but she did miss him. It had been a few days since they really had any alone time together. She must have been frowning because she felt his finger between her brows. What's with the long face? He asked. Hinata looked down at her menu. I just really missed you is all, she said softly. She didn't want him to feel guilty about working, but she needed him to know she missed him when he's away from her. Hinata sighed when Shikamaru put his arm around her shoulder. She leaned into kissing his neck softly. Normally they weren't a couple who displayed a lot of public affection, but Hinata thought every once in a while it was okay. Shikamaru kissed the side of her head. Hinata smiled and pulled back just enough to receive the kiss he placed on her lips. Yeah, just a little PDA every once in a while couldn't hurt, Hinata thought to herself. I missed you too. Hinata smiled and looked back at the menu. She instantly blushed when she felt Shikamaru's hand on her thigh and his lips against her ear. It won't be long before I'm tucking you in every night. If Hinata's head could have exploded, it would have. I can't wait, Hinata said softly, earning a low chuckle from Shikamaru. My mother is meeting with your father tomorrow. She insists on having the engagement party at our place since the wedding will surely be held at the Hyugas, Shikamaru said with a sigh. Hinata smiled. It'll be fine really. I already talked with my father about it and he agreed to let your family host the engagement party as long as Hyuga hosts the wedding, Hinata explained. She knew how important it was for his mother to be involved, so she made sure to talk with her father about it. You're an angel, you know that. Hinata giggled. I don't know about that, but thank you, Hinata said with a blush. I have to go see Ino to put in the flower order for the engagement party, and I also have to ask her about making out invitation. She heard Shikamaru's sigh. I'm so glad you've got everything under control. She smiled and put her hand in his. She knew Shikamaru wasn't one to plan out anything big, especially when it came to their clans, so she didn't mind taking it on. She was used to it, so she didn't mind taking over. Anything for you. Are you really that hungry? Hinata looked at Shikamaru confused. Are you not hungry? Or? Hinata stopped mid-sentence when she finally locked eyes with Shikamaru. She now knew exactly what he meant. She blushed and put her menu down slowly. She then tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. Right now? She asked. But don't you have to report back soon? She saw him shrug. I don't mind being late, but that's only if you want to. Hinata felt her heart beating fast and hard in her chest. That is if you think, will you get in trouble? Hinata asked. She didn't want him to get reprimanded because he decided to play hooky. Hinata felt herself being pulled from the booth. She couldn't help but laugh when she felt herself being lifted off the ground. As embarrassed as she was at the small group of people staring at them, she couldn't help but be a little giddy too. It's been even longer since they've spent that kind of time together. Naruto swept around the shop as Ino watered new flowers just placed on the stand outside. Their morning had been pretty busy and Ino told him that she thought he was the reason for that. He wasn't exactly sure what she meant, but she was sure they customers were there mostly because he was working there now. Naruto could admit that he did have a little fan club now, and it was a bit odd for him. He wasn't used to having girls declare their love for him. He already knew it was because he was proclaimed the hero of the village, so there was really no surprise when women and a few guys started pursuing him. It kind of made him think about how sallow people could really be. He didn't think that they were necessarily bad people, because most of them weren't. It just seemed that people only acknowledge you once they think you done something incredible. But isn't he the same person he was before? Sure, he's changed a bit, and that's mostly due to simply maturing. But he is still the same Naruto he's always been, and that just made him think that they only wanted the village hero, and not him. Half the people who worshipped him now didn't even know him, and they still don't. They've just fallen in love with the idea of him, and that just isn't how he wanted to start a relationship of any kind off. He wanted someone to want him for being him. Not yet. What the hell are you waiting for? Kiba asked. The right time, I guess. Naruto replied. There were some things he just couldn't share with anyone yet. Not even Kiba. Well, I'm sure it'll work out, Kiba said, giving Naruto a hard pat on the back. You're a pretty good catch. Naruto laughed. Now who's being gross? Yeah, well, sue me for trying to support your new love, Kiba said, folding his arms. They both sat there silently for a while. Naruto appreciated Kiba, he really did. He really did need a little encouragement and someone in his corner. His fear of rejection was real, and just like Kiba, he does think Ino likes him too, but he couldn't be for sure. Only time would tell. Maybe he should take Kiba's advice and just tell her how he feels. The worst things she could so was say no, and that's what he feared most. Rejection. Ino sat quietly across from Shikamaru and Hinata, sipping her water. Hinata contacted her a few days earlier about getting things together for their engagement party. This was actually the first time she spent time with Hinata and Shikamaru together for so long. She couldn't help but smile a little at her old teammate. It was clear that he wasn't into any of this, but he was very attentive to Hinata. He listened to every word she said, and to Ino's surprise he even suggested something to go on their invitations. She supposed love did that to people. She could tell they were very much in love. She has never seen Shikamaru look at anyone like he did Hinata. His eyes never really left her the entire time. He watched as she flipped through catalogs of flowers, never once complaining. Yes, love most definitely changed her former teammate. What about this one? Hinata asked as she showed Ino a picture. What do you think, Shikamaru? Ino looked at the white bouquet of lilies with mostly green decorating them. Those are really nice, Ino replied. You sure? I thought you wanted a little more color. Shikamaru asked, taking the book from Hinata. Ino watched as Hinata tucked her hair behind her ear. Well, your mother likes white lilies, right? I remember seeing that her wedding bouquet was really similar to the one in that picture. Both Ino and Shikamaru looked at Hinata. Yeah, but you don't have to do that, Shikamaru said, gently squeezing Hinata's knee. This is about what you want. Hinata smiled. I know, but since she's hosting the engagement party. I though it would be nice for the centerpieces to be lilies. Hinata turned to face Shikamaru. She covered his hand on her knee with her own. I know this is about us, but I can't help but want to involve everyone in this union. We've all lost so much and I want your mother to feel included as much as possible. Ino could only sigh. They were a beautiful couple and Hinata was just as amazingly sweet as she's always been. Shikamaru was really lucky in her opinion. It wasn't often someone found someone so considerate and loving as Hinata. Then again, Hinata was very lucky to have Shikamaru too. He had his own good qualities as well and Hinata was able to see past his lazy facade. So white lilies with the green? Ino asked. Hinata looked at Shikamaru to answer. Yeah, they're perfect. Ino was sure he was talking about Hinata the way he stared at her when he said it. Great, if I may make a suggestion on the vase, Ino said, pulling out a small picture. I've never suggested this for this type of event before, but I think it'll be beautiful. Here, take a look. Hinata took the small picture and smiled as soon as she saw it. I love it, Ino. Look, Shikamaru. Shikamaru only raised his brow because it was just a wooden box with flowers in it. He wasn't too sure what was great about it, but if Hinata loved it then it was perfect. Me too. We'll take them as well, Ino. Oh, and I want these invitations, the ivory ones with green and gold writing, Hinata said, pointing one of the invitations Ino placed on the table. I thought you wanted the pink and lavender ones. Shikamaru asked. Well, yes, that was my first choice, but I think these are better for us, Hinata explained, and Shikamaru nodded. I'll have the invites printed for you once I return from my trip. You going somewhere? Shikamaru asked with his brow raised. Ino blushed a little and cleared her throat. Yes, I'm taking a quick trip. I'll be gone for 3 days, so my mom will be working at the shop while I'm away. Well, that sounds great, Ino. It's good to get away everyone once in a while, Hinata said with a smile. Going by train? Shikamaru asked. Oh, the train. How exciting, Hinata said with a smile. Ino raised her brow. Did Shikamaru know something? I am actually. This will be my first time since the upgrades. Yeah, funny story. Naruto asked me just last week how to buy train tickets. Hinata looked between Ino and Shikamaru. Oh my. She squeaked, covering her mouth. Are you guys going together? Hinata asked, leaning forward towards Ino. We are, Ino said lowly, sitting up straight. There was no need to deny the fact she was going with Naruto. There wasn't any harm in traveling with a friend. We're going to the southern meadows to celebrate my dad's birthday. Hinata gasped and Shikamaru's eye widened a little at Ino's answer. Now, he half expected her to dance around the question. He never expected her to say that the two of them were going in remembrance of her dad. Naruto had made more progress than Shikamaru had originally thought. That's great, Ino. Yes, it really is, Hinata added. Ino couldn't help but blush. She already knew what they were thinking, but that wasn't the case, at least not yet anyway. Her and Naruto were still learning each other and she was fully sure what Naruto's feelings were towards. Either way, she was happy to have their support. It was obvious they wanted this to happen because Shikamaru mentioned briefly to her that he and Hinata talked about the two of them. Ino smiled. Thanks. Sakura sat awkwardly at the table and Naruto and Kiba shared random conversations, never really sticking to one particular topic for too long. She hadn't really seen or spoken to Naruto since the park and she was happy he asked her to have lunch with him. She didn't expect to see Kiba there when she arrived. She kind of wanted to be able to speak with him alone for a while, but that didn't seem to happen. When she thought about it, she didn't know that Kiba and Naruto were so close. It wasn't really strange since they were both very similar in a lot of ways, she just didn't know how she missed it. It seemed as if they were like old buddies to anyone listening to their conversation. She knew Naruto hung out with Shikamaru occasionally since he would often bring him up in conversations. Mostly to complain about how long Shikamaru's lectures were. She couldn't remember Naruto mentioning Kiba, and even if he had, she probably wouldn't have paid it much attention. It seemed like there was more to Naruto than she originally thought. Of course she knew he had other friends, but she didn't know he had friends that he was this close with. She honestly so caught up in her own world to notice all the signs that Naruto was drifting away from her. He had his own set of friends now. Sakura thought back to Ino and frowned a little. She still didn't like the fact that Ino and Naruto were like an item or something now. It didn't sit well with her at all. She could finally admit to herself she was jealous of Naruto's affection towards Ino. It wasn't that she didn't like that Ino was smiling more and seemed happier. She just didn't like the fact that it was Naruto who brought it out of her. Sakura looked at Kiba for a moment. Why couldn't it had been Kiba, she thought to herself. She would never admit it out loud, but Kiba was attractive. She would have much rather it been him over Naruto. What was she due to now was the only question. She wasn't completely sure how she felt about Naruto, but she knew she didn't want him with Ino. It was childish and she knew that. She was more angry at herself for ignoring all the signs that Naruto was pulling away from her. When the flowers stopped coming, or when Naruto didn't ask her out anymore. They were all there and Sakura ignored them, or rather she didn't particularly care at the time. She really needed time to speak with Naruto so they could clear the air. She needed to know his thought on everything, and maybe she will be able to figure out her own feelings in the process. It was only fair that she let him know how she felt before it was too late. It was important that Naruto knew she was uncomfortable with their current situation so that they could work on moving forward. Naruto, would you like to hang out tomorrow? Sakura asked. I can't tomorrow, Naruto answered slowly. Why not? Shikamaru said we have the day off, Kiba asked, giving Naruto a confused look. It's fine, what about the day after? We could meet after my shift. Naruto gave Sakura a nervous laugh. I can't the day after either. Oh, was all Sakura said in response. She wasn't sure what was going on now. Naruto seemed like he was trying to avoid her, but why? You pretty busy Kiba asked, only to have Naruto look at him. Sakura watched quietly as Naruto and Kiba had a silent conversation with their eyes. She was sure Naruto was trying to communicate something to the other man without her knowing. What could he possibly have to hide from her? I forgot about the trip, Kiba exclaimed with a laugh. Totally slipped my mind. Naruto couldn't help but roll his eyes. Kiba was dumber than him sometimes. Yeah, you're going on a trip? Sakura asked, confused. Naruto never went on leisure trips and only traveled for business-related issues or missions. Yeah, tomorrow morning. I'll be gone for 3 days, but after then we can hang out. I promise, Naruto explained. Sakura frowned. Why didn't he tell her he was leaving the village? Why is the fact that he's going on a trip a secret? Why didn't you tell me? I've been pretty busy lately and we haven't seen each other for a while. It really slipped my mind, Naruto replied. Sakura's frown deepened. That didn't make any sense. He clearly didn't want her to know about it because he could have just said when she first asked him to hang out. Kiba had to mention it before Naruto said anything. So if Kiba didn't say anything, did that mean Naruto wasn't going to tell her? Why would he keep it a secret, unless… Ino, Sakura said looking down. Who? Kiba asked. Sakura. Ino has nothing to do with this, Naruto said reaching towards her. He didn't want her blaming Ino for him not telling her. Sakura stood. No, it's fine. There was a long pause before Sakura spoke again. I would have just appreciated you telling me about you and Ino. Kiba cleared his throat. It seemed that Naruto hadn't spoken to Sakura about Ino yet. I'll let you guys talk. I'll catch up with you later, Kiba said patting Naruto's shoulder as he walked past him. Naruto sighed. He really didn't know what to say. He could tell when they last met that Sakura didn't like him hanging out with Ino. She was easier to read than she thought and it didn't take him long to realize she wasn't happy with it. He first noticed her spying before she finally approached the shop and quickly figured out why. He was entirely ready to have this talk with Sakura yet. Just go, Naruto. Naruto watched as Sakura walked away. He never meant to cause her any pain and he honestly thought she wouldn't care as long as he left her alone. He could see now that wasn't the case at all. He would properly speak with her once he returned from his trip with Ino, because he was going to talk with Ino first. Ino sat nervously on her couch waiting for Naruto to arrive. He told her that they would be traveling with a small convoy to the nearest train station. Ino couldn't help but notice her mother staring at her. She wouldn't dare ask the older woman why she was staring, because Ino was pretty sure she already knew the answer to that question. Even so, Ino was curious to what her mother would actually say. Spit it out, Ino said folding her arms. Mother said softly. I'm not sure what you mean honey. Ino rolled her eyes. Come on mom, you've been staring at me for what seems like hours. Just say it already. Ino watched as her mother placed her cup on the table between them. Promise you won't get mad. Ino relaxed a little. She didn't really plan on getting upset no matter what her mother said. I promise. I actually want you to promise me something. Ino raised her brow and waited for her mother to continue. Promise me if Naruto reaches for your hand, you'll hold on tight. Mom, you want me to hold his hand? Ino asked. You know exactly what I mean. I know just like you do that you have given yourself every excuse in the world not to like him. Ino's mom smiled at her. I know you like him and I think you should at least explore it some. Ino sighed to herself. She already knew what her mother was talking about, but it was going to be a little tough. Sure she liked Naruto, but that didn't mean Naruto liked her that way as well. Naruto was kind to everyone he met so it could be easy to confuse his kindness for feelings that aren't actually there. Ino sighed. Mom, I'm not even sure he likes me like that. Ask him. Ino gave her mother a confused look. So she was just supposed to ask Naruto if he liked more than a friend. Years ago this was something she would have done without question, but she wasn't that person anymore. She wasn't shy, but she wasn't as confident in herself as she once was. Ino really couldn't handle Naruto's answer to such a question, no matter what it was. I can't do that, Ino said softly. Of course you can. And if he talks about you as much as you talk about him, then I am willing to bet money he really likes you. Naruto slowly made his way to Ino's front door. He was really excited about their trip. He barely slept last night and his conversation with Sakura didn't make sleeping any easier. Naruto often wondered when his personal life got so complicated. It wasn't as if he didn't already know what he wanted, he just didn't want anyone to get hurt. Now it seemed like, at least to him, that Sakura may have feelings for him. For now he would focus his energy on Ino, because right now she was his priority. He smiled to himself as he threw his bag over his shoulder. He looked at the 2 train tickets in his hands. He had a good feeling about this little trip with Ino. It wasn't long before Naruto was standing outside of Ino's front door. He took a deep breath and was about to knock before the door swung open. There stood an older woman he was sure was Ino's mother. He was never formally introduced to her, but he had seen her in the shop a few times and around the village. "Please come in." Naruto smiles and walked through the open door. "Hey, I'm Naruto by the way," he said, extending the woman his hand. "Oh, I know exactly who you are, Mr. Uzumaki," she replied. "Put that hand of yours away," she said, playfully pushing Naruto's hand away. "I don't know if Ino told you, but I give hugs, honey." Naruto felt himself being pulled into a tight embrace. It was little odd for him. It wasn't that he didn't like being hugged, it was more so no one actually ever hugs him. He slowly brought his arms around her, hugging her back. Mrs. Yamanaka leaned back and smiled up at Naruto, giving his shoulders a gentle squeeze. "Mom." Naruto turned his attention to Ino, who was coming out of the kitchen. "Oh, sweetie, Naruto is here to pick you up," her mother replied, standing beside Naruto, linking their arms. Ino narrowed her eyes a little at her mother. What is she up to? Ino thought to herself. She then turned her attention to Naruto, who only smiled in return. Ino eyed him a little longer to see if his reaction would give her any indication that her mother said anything weird while she wasn't around. "Hey," Ino said softly, making her way towards the pair. "Hey," Naruto said in return. There was a moment of silence. "Well," Mrs. Yamanaka said, patting Naruto on his back, "I hope you two enjoy your trip, and Naruto, you must come by the compound sometime." Naruto looked at Ino before he answered. "I mean sure, if it's okay with Ino." "Sure it is. We were just talking about inviting you over for dinner." Ino rolled her eyes. "Mom, please leave him alone. I can hold your bag," Naruto said, taking Ino's things from her. "And it's no trouble really. I'd love to visit." Mrs. Yamanaka smiled. "See, he'd love to." "Sure," Ino said, quickly grabbing Naruto's arm and pulling him towards the door. She didn't know why, but she was both embarrassed and grateful. Her mother had done something Ino herself couldn't bring herself to do, but at the same time she still wasn't sure what to make of Naruto's behavior. He was genuinely a nice person, so that fear of confusing his kindness for something more was back. "See ya, Mrs. Yamanaka," Naruto yelled over his shoulder. "Call me Mom, dear." Ino's face was red now. Seriously. The walk to the station was quiet. It wasn't awkward, and for that Ino was happy. Her mother was out of control. Ino would still glances at Naruto every so often, and he seemed as happy as always. Maybe he paid her mother's behavior no mind. Either way, she was happy. He didn't question it. Naruto smiled to himself when he saw Ino staring at him and trying to hide it. He knew she was embarrassed by what happened at her house, so he knew not to bring it up. That was one thing he learned from Sakura. He could hear her voice in his head, "Stop say unnecessary things. Learn to read the situation before you speak. Better yet, don't speak at all." "Here we are," Naruto announced as he and Ino approached the small building. The train was already sitting on the tracks. There were people already in line waiting to board the train. "I haven't seen the new trains up this close. It's nice," Ino said, looking at it. The new design was beautiful. "I heard the ride is smoother than the old ones." Shikamaru said he was able to nap peacefully when he rode. Ino couldn't help but laugh a little. Leave it Shikamaru to rate the train ride based on how well he was able to nap. "Next." "That's us," Naruto said as he stood to the side so Ino could board first. He showed the man their tickets and followed Ino as she walked towards their seats. Naruto noticed an elderly couple sitting across from them. He hoped Ino wouldn't mind having seats facing the couple. Since the trip was little last minute, he bought the last of 3 seats left. Ino sat down and smiled at the couple who sat in front of her. "What a beautiful couple. Are you two honeymooning?" It was the lady who asked. Naruto almost dropped his bag while putting it in the overhead space at hearing the woman's question. Ino gave a nervous laugh. Well, you see. Leave them alone, dear, her husband said, adjusting the paper he was reading in his hands. Naruto sat down next to Ino and smiled at the woman who was still openly staring at them. Hey there, I'm Naruto. Ah yes, you're the village hero, the woman commented. This time Ino looked towards the woman. It wasn't too strange that someone recognized who Naruto was, since he was pretty famous now. Everyone knew of him and would often stop and talk with him if they had the chance. She was sure when they made it to Southern Meadows he would have fans there too. Ino smiled a little. She felt Naruto deserved all the attention he got. He was a hard-working, kind, and he was sure to be their next Hokage. She sighed softly as the woman continued to talk Naruto's ears off as the train pulled away from the station. For me too. The fireworks show continued. Naruto and Ino stood close together, their hands slowly entwined, their connection deepening with every passing moment. As the final firework burst in a shower of brilliant sparks, the crowd erupted in cheers, and Naruto and Ino began their walk back to the hut. The path was illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns, creating a serene and intimate atmosphere. Ino looked up at Naruto, her heart full but her expression thoughtful. You know, I've been feeling a bit lost lately, she said quietly. Like there's this emptiness inside me that I can't quite fill. Naruto squeezed her hand gently. I understand, I've been feeling the same way. I didn't want to admit it, but being with you tonight, sharing this moment, it's made me realize how much I need to be honest with myself and with you. Ino stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The moonlight casting a gentle glow on her face. What do you mean? Naruto took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Ino, I care about you more than just as a friend. I've been afraid to say anything because I didn't want to risk losing you, but I want to be more for you. I want to be someone you can count on, always. Ino's eyes widened in surprise, her emotions swirling as she took in his words. She stepped closer, her gaze softening. Naruto, I care about you too. You've always been there for me, and tonight has made me realize just how much I want you in my life. I was just too scared to admit it. Naruto's heart leapt at her confession. You don't have to be scared, Ino. I'm here for you, no matter what. They stood there, their foreheads gently touching, sharing a moment of profound connection. The world seemed to pause around them, leaving just the two of them in their own private, magical bubble. Eventually, they began their walk back to the hut, hand in hand. The lanterns continued to cast a soft light over their path, the lingering magic of the festival wrapping around them like a warm embrace. With each step, they felt a little closer, their hearts a little lighter, and the night seemed to promise a new beginning.